Hi, friends, and welcome back. I'm Emily,
And I'm Whitney.
and you're listening to Cousins Talk Crime. Part 2 of Larry Eyler. We're here. We're ready for it.
I know, I'm excited.
I'm not ready for it, but this guy sucks.
Yeah.
You know?
He seems very confident for someone that committed all these murders. I'm wondering how he eventually gets caught.
Yeah. It'll be nice to learn how he eventually gets caught. Because he does get caught. I will say that. I can't stand when people get away with crap like this. But he should have gotten, I will just say, he should have gotten caught last time.
Yeah.
But because of fine lines and fine print, he got let go, and it's just awful. You know, we're suspecting that he killed 17 people, and we just let him go back on the street again.
So when obviously that same task force, they're aware of his move. Are they still like watching him actively or
I think so.
yeah.
I think so. I think he's always like on the radar.
Okay.
Now, if you haven't listened to part 1, make sure you listen to part 1. There's a lot of information that came through. You won't want to pick up right here. But go ahead and listen to that.
We're actually going to try to have a YouTube video out so you can actually see us while we're talking to you.
I know. I feel like this case is a good one to put out a video because facial expressions. I can't stand this guy. There are so many times when we're talking about these killers and like you can't hear the eyes rolling in the back of my head, but they are.
But now you'll be able to see them.
You'll be able to see this. Yeah, so much better. Facial expressions, I think, tell a story.
Yeah.
Pretty good too. So, all right, let's just jump right back into Larry. So, Larry has moved up to Chicago. He has just gotten away with the murder of a man named Ralph Calise because they searched his vehicle when they shouldn't have legally, and so he got off. But they did have physical evidence that tied him to that murder, and it's heartbreaking that he got away. Now, fast forward August 19th, 1984, around 10:30 p.m., Eyler lured a 16-year-old boy named Daniel Bridges into his apartment. Now, Daniel was the youngest of 13 children.
Oh my gosh.
How can you even keep track at that point?
You can't. That's a lot of kids.
It's a lot of children. It was stated, I'm not saying that just because you have 13 kids that you're going to neglect your children, but Bridges was known to be a neglected child, and he was a habitual runaway. He was also gay, and he was working as a male prostitute. At 16 years old, he was working as a male prostitute.
That's so sad.
Yeah, apparently from what I read, he was actually working as a prostitute since he was 12.
Oh my gosh.
12.
That's heart-wrenching.
I don't even think I knew like what sex was when I was 12.
No.
Let alone knowing that you could like sell it for money. I don't know. Now, Daniel Bridges was actually a really close friend of one of Larry's victims, another 16-year-old named Irvin Gibson. We had talked about him very briefly earlier. And he actually knew Eyler and was very weary of him. I don't know if Eyler offered him more money than anybody typically would, and that's why he got with him, or what. And there was actually a documentary that was filmed a couple months prior to Daniel dying, and it was a documentary about child exploitation in America. So he was known to have been a prostitute, and he was interviewed for a documentary. I've tried to find the documentary. I couldn't find it. It's out there somewhere, I'm sure. When he was interviewed on this documentary, he actually spoke about Eyler specifically.
What did he say?
He described Eyler as a quote-unquote real freak who was well known to the male prostitutes up in that area. That's so sad because, like, he knew in a place like Chicago, it's a big city.
Yeah.
And he called out Larry specifically on this documentary.
So were all of them aware? Did they all think he was a murderer or no? They didn't have that. They just thought he was.
They just knew he was into, like, the
Yeah.
BDSM stuff. I don't know if they thought that he was a murderer or not.
Yeah.
I would hope that if Daniel Bridges thought that he was a murderer,
Yeah.
he never would have went. But yeah, I don't know, it was like seeing the future. Him
Yeah.
talking about him specifically on that documentary. It was crazy. Once in Larry's apartment, Eyler tied Daniel to a chair using a clothesline, and then he beat, tortured, and stabbed him to death. Eyler then dismembered his body into 8 pieces, drained all the blood from them, and then placed them into plastic trash bags.
So just like that one victim that was like far away
It was
somewhere.
Wisconsin, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that might be one reason why they're tying him to Wisconsin, is because he dismembered Daniel.
Mm-hmm. And drained the blood.
Yeah.
Ugh.
This all could have been avoided if he was in prison. This
Yeah.
is what pisses me off the most, is this could have been avoided. It was going to take Eyler committing another murder to get him caught. And we just freaking let him go.
So where did he dump this body? I'm sure you're getting there.
Yeah. He put them all in plastic bags and he threw them in the dumpster outside of his apartment. I don't know if Eyler wanted to get caught or if he was actually getting lazy or he had this sense of God that he wasn't going to get caught. So he's like, I'm gonna dump his legs and pieces of his body out in the trash can.
Outside my house.
Yeah. And I won't get caught. There's no one's caught me yet. They're not going to catch me now. The dismembered body was discovered by a janitor a couple days later on the morning of August 21st. And his remains have been placed inside the dumpster by Eyler's apartment. Now, after the remains were found, they questioned the janitor and some other janitors. And one of them said that they did see Larry taking trash bags out to the specific trash can. So he was seen
placing them in there.
Placing them in there. Now, the police did recognize Eyler's name immediately. And the police captain on the investigation team, I think he knew Larry's name and thought he should have been to prison already. And so when he heard about this and Larry being connected, he was immediately, like, enraged. And he's like, I do not care who's in this apartment. You're going to arrest whoever's there. I don't care who's there. You're just going to go into that apartment. You're going to get him right now. So within minutes, Larry was arrested in his apartment and Dobrovolsky's was there as well. So Dobrovolsky's was arrested and taken into custody, but he was released, like, quickly. So they didn't suspect him at all. A forensic examination of Eyler's apartment revealed copious amounts of blood that had been recently cleaned from the bedroom, and it was also repainted. So I don't know if there were blood stains on the wall even after he cleaned, and so he painted, or what. And they were still able to locate blood splattering across the floor, the walls, and the ceiling. Traces of blood were also found on the mattress, the seat of a chair, and a leather belt, a sofa, and beneath the floorboards. All over the freaking place.
Was it all the kid Daniel's blood?
Yeah. It was all confirmed to be Daniel's. Now, this is the first time I know that he killed somebody indoors. Because it is, when you stab someone, however many times you stab them, it's messy. I guess that's why he did it outdoors so much.
Well, he also mutilated the body. And did he hack all that up in the inside?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's white blood everywhere.
Yeah. Eyler's fingerprints were found on all the bags that the remains were found in. He just got that sense of godlike sense, like nothing's gonna happen to me, unless he really wanted to be caught. I can't think of had to be one of those. Now, one day later, Eyler was formally charged with the murder. He still denied any involvement and insisted his fingerprints must have been inadvertently placed upon those bags when he moved them aside to place his bags in there. So those bags were already in the dumpster. He grabbed them, pushed them aside to put in his own trash, and that's how his fingerprints got on there.
Yep.
These people will reach for anything. Now, this autopsy determined death had been caused due to multiple wounds inflicted via a knife and like a hacksaw. No facial fractures were evident, although the teenager had evidently been beaten around the right eye, also suffering numerous shallow cuts to his face before his death. 14 wounds likely inflicted with an ice pick were also evident upon and around Bridges' sternum. These wounds also were inflicted prior to death. So he was tortured.
Yeah.
Big time. 5 knife wounds to the abdomen were deep and had caused sections of his intestine to protrude through the wounds. 3 additional knife wounds to the teenager's back had been inflicted with such force the heart and left lung had been perforated.
That's awful.
Now, the prosecutors wanted the death penalty, so they opted to charge Eyler with aggravated kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and concealment of Bridges' body in addition to the charge of murder. They had to get all of that stuff to pretty much receive the death penalty. So for someone that has killed this many people, so we're thinking, what, 18 people now?
Mm-hmm.
And what are your opinions on the death penalty? Is that something that you think this person deserves, or what's your opinion?
I believe in the death penalty, but I believe you can't get it wrong. You know, it can't be a circumstance where maybe they didn't do it, you know? Because
there can be zero doubt.
Yeah, there has to be zero doubt that this person committed this crime, you know?
And how brutal does a crime have to be, do you think, to receive the death penalty?
I really think it just all depends on, like, if you did it or not. I feel like if you're killing people, you deserve, you know, the same.
Okay. See, me personally, I'm kind of opposite, where, and this is one of those controversial things that a lot of people have different opinions on. To me, someone as awful as Eyler, I don't think they deserve the mercy of the death penalty.
Yeah.
Especially when the death penalty at this point is just lethal injection.
Yeah.
You just go to sleep while people are looking at you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He doesn't deserve that. He deserves to rot in prison.
Yeah.
He deserves to get someone to beat the shit out of him every single day.
Yeah.
For the rest of his life.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm someone that when someone gets to a certain point, you're not good enough for that.
Yeah.
You need to rot forever. So I personally wouldn't push the death penalty super hard because that's my opinion, but I get why they're pushing it. So Eyler was brought to trial for these charges on July 1st. He was being tried in Illinois and entered a formal plea of not guilty. Now, since Eyler was financially quote-unquote insolvent, he was defended by 2 public defenders, which isn't good when you're trying to get away with murder.
Yeah.
Usually you want a really good lawyer to... But his old lawyer that got him off of the original charge, David Shippers, he actually offered his legal services for free. Like, I'm going to get him off. I feel like defense lawyers are seen as the bad guys sometimes, but it's literally their job to defend somebody and try to
prove that they didn't do it.
Try to prove that they're innocent. You know, and defense lawyers have gotten innocent people off before, and that's great. But it just kills me when someone is this guilty. This guy fought so hard that he gave his legal services for free to get someone off that we're 99.99% sure has killed 18 people.
Yeah. I think a lot of attorneys just want the press, too.
Yeah.
You want to get your name out there. If you're a defense attorney and you can get someone off that committed 17 murders, who wouldn't want to hire you? You know?
I know. Exactly.
It's all about the money.
Where are the morals here, David Shippers? Anyway, that bugged me. His lawyers did advise him not to testify on his own behalf. I think, again, They told him to shut his mouth. I didn't see very many interviews with him, but I think he was a very cocky and arrogant guy, especially at this point. He had every reason to be cocky and arrogant because he'd gotten away with it so much. The opening statement from the prosecution to the jury outlines the physical and circumstantial evidence and stated how close Eyler had eluded justice had the janitors not suspected that he was dumping illegal garbage and they happened to find the body. That body would probably be buried in some landfill somewhere and Larry would still be out and about. So the prosecution had to paint him as this evil, evil person. And the defense opened up stating that the sole evidence proving Eyler's involvement was that he handled bags that had Bridges' body, but no one can prove that Eyler was the one that actually murdered him.
What about the blood they found in the apartment?
Oh, I mean, it was in his apartment, but they can't prove that Larry was the one that did it. Well, unless we have a camera on someone, we can't prove that they actually do anything.
That's a lot of physical evidence that it was in his apartment. Because how does he explain that?
The defense lawyers are reaching.
Yeah.
They're reaching real hard. And they tried throwing his visitors under the bus, saying that maybe Dobrovolsky was the one that committed the crime and Larry was just covering up for his lover.
Yeah.
And that either of them could be potential killers. Now, I don't know if I had said this. Maybe I missed it. Robert Little was actually visiting Larry that day. He was up in Chicago. I missed that part. Whoops. Yeah. So Robert Little was also a visitor. He was visiting Larry that weekend, and he had left only a couple hours before Daniel Bridges was murdered, according to him. So we're thinking Robert Little may have murdered Daniel Bridges or
So they were all three there at some point.
At some point, yeah. So the defense lawyers are really trying to hone on the fact that there were two other people at his house at some point, and they could be the murderers. We're not going to say that Eyler wasn't there or he didn't know what happened, but you can't prove that he was the one that did it. So the first witness to testify was Robert Little. He testified to have been in Eyler's company the 17th or the 19th, although he did claim he returned home to Terre Haute at approximately 10:15 p.m. And what did I say? Daniel Bridges was brought in at 11:30, but Terre Haute to Chicago is probably a 3-hour drive, so he was probably gone for 4 hours, according to that statement. Robert Stein, the coroner, testified on behalf of the prosecution. He described the extensive torture and mutilation inflicted upon Bridges was one of the worst cases he had ever seen. And he stated that the wounds received matched the hacksaw blades that were recovered from Eyler's apartment. But during cross-examination, he did state that traces of alcohol and cocaine were found in the victim's blood, suggesting that it is possible he had not been kidnapped and entered Eyler's apartment willingly. So this is on the case of the kidnapping. They're saying he wasn't kidnapped. He went there willingly. But my argument is that this is a 16-year-old child.
Yeah.
He's a child.
Yeah.
You know, they're not supposed to be held accountable for their actions. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I feel like I've seen this before where a father and a mother are split up and the father decides one day that he wants to take the kid. Even though it's not his day, that's still quote-unquote kidnapping if it's out of the mother's, consent. Even though this child was fine with it and they were consenting to go in, it's still kidnapping.
Yeah.
So Larry knew what he was doing. This child didn't know. This was a child.
Yeah, we're talking about a minor.
Yeah. So, kidnapping.
Yeah.
One of the janitors testified to having witnessed Eyler make 8 to 12 trips to his storage locker on August 20th. And Eyler explained to him that he was getting tools for a job. But I assume at this point he is getting tools to cut up Daniel Bridges' body. This janitor is witnessing him doing that.
Yeah.
Several hours later, he then witnessed Eyler making 3 separate trips to the dumpster. Next on the stand was John Dobrovolsky's, Eyler's lover, and he stated he had called Eyler 3 times between 8:45 p.m. and 11:25 p.m. that day. No answers. He called again at 2:45 in the morning, And Eyler did pick up the phone. He was told not to visit because Robert Little was still there. And they didn't get along. So Robert's still here.
Why.
Yeah. So it's 2:45 in the morning. Robert's still here. You can't come. But Dobrovolsky's was like, Robert shouldn't still be there because Robert always left like Sunday evening so that he could get home in time to go to work, the next day.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't still be there. So he thought that was suspicious. And he also testified that during this conversation, he told Eyler that he was coming to his house and he would be there in 15 minutes. And Eyler kind of freaked out and was like, no, I'll come to you. Do not come. I will come to your house. And when Eyler got over to Dobrovolsky's home, he was like freshly showered. His hair was still wet. And he had no interest in having like sexual relations with him or anything. So he was just very weirded out about the whole situation. And it led Dobrovolsky's to be very jealous, thinking that he was with another man. And that's why, he was with another man. He wasn't dismembering the body of a 16-year-old.
Right.
So the defense really grabbed onto the suspicion that he had, saying that Eyler was with another man. So that the jury wouldn't think that he's like, oh yeah, he was with another man. Yeah, that's what it was. Not he was dismembering a body. He's with another man. Yeah, that's what it was.
That's crazy.
A forensic technician testified that no semen was found upon or within the victim's body, and this led the prosecution to argue that Eyler brought the victim home solely to torture and murder them, rather than a sexual experience with BDSM gone wrong, because they thought that maybe he would claim that. Yeah. Like, we were living out one of my sexual fantasies, he's a prostitute, and I accidentally killed him. And then accidentally cut him into pieces and tried to hide the body. Upon cross-examination, the forensic technician claimed that there was blood found under the fingernails of the victim that did not belong to Eyler or the victim. So there is someone else's blood under their fingernail.
Whose is it?
I don't know. No other person, from what I read, no other person known to have been in Eyler's apartment. So John or Robert.
It wasn't theirs?
They didn't even take samples of their blood to compare it. I think that they wanted to get Larry so bad.
They didn't care.
They didn't care. Yeah, they didn't care.
But it's just weird to me. I think both of them knew what Larry was doing.
I think Robert Little definitely did.
Little.
I don't know if John Dobrovolsky's did. I really don't.
Right, because the way you just described how he acted, like he didn't want him to know.
Mm-hmm. I think Robert Little very well. Maybe Robert Little was still at his house, during that conversation when he said he was at his house. Maybe he was there. Maybe Robert Little is the one that killed him. I don't know. Maybe they did it together. Yeah. We also, the Stephen Egan boy that was in the shed, we're thinking that he was killed by two people. Maybe Robert Little is involved. I don't know. So the closing arguments were made after 8 days of testimony. The prosecution really honed in on the fact that this was premeditated and Eyler's efforts to conceal all the evidence in the crime by putting them in the dumpster. I would also go into full detail of what the defense would say, but it just makes me mad because the defense, like I said, they reach and they did a lot of victim blaming.
No, yeah.
A 16-year-old kid did not go there to die.
No.
He didn't go there to get dismembered and tortured.
No.
But in some cases, it can be really great, but
if you didn't do something.
They're sitting there and they're blaming a 16-year-old kid for getting lured to his death.
Yeah, I feel like when that's your job, you gotta do it.
You gotta separate yourself from it, but... And I get that for a public defender.
Yeah.
But I'll go back on it. This other guy, free of charge, I'll defend you. That wasn't his civil duty. It was him really trying to get Larry off of this.
Yeah. I think he probably just wanted money.
The defense was victim blaming and they were reaching desperately. The jury only took 3 hours to deliberate and they did find Eyler guilty of aggravated kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and the murder of Daniel Bridges. And Larry showed little to no emotion while the verdict was read. Now, I feel like if they would have came out with a verdict of not guilty, he would have had a smug-ass look on his face. But when they said he was guilty, he had no emotion. No remorse, nothing. So after the verdict is read, they'll go to court at a later time to get sentenced and stuff like that. So the lawyers now had to argue the sentence, and the prosecution did everything that they could to get the death penalty. They were really pushing for the death penalty. And the defense brought in Larry's mom, his stepdad, his sister, and a Catholic chaplain, and they testified about Larry's quote-unquote kind and decent behavior. He was a good boy. He would never do such a thing. I get the mother. I get it. It's your child.
Yeah.
And she also tried to claim responsibility of all of this because of the way he was brought up and how he had a broken home growing up. And she did plead for them to spare Eyler's life. And they wanted a life sentence opposed to death. On October 3rd, the judge formally sentenced Eyler to death by lethal injection. He did state that the decision was very hard on him because he was a very religious man. So it was very hard for him to put somebody to death. Now I will just quote the judge and what the judge said to him as he was sentencing him. He said, "The senseless and barbaric murder of a 16-year-old boy, a killing which was so brutal it defies description, shows me your complete disregard for human life. If there ever was a person or a situation for which the death penalty is appropriate, it is you." Go off, King. "You are an evil person. You truly deserve to die for your acts. I thereby sentence you to death for the murder of Danny Bridges, committed during the course of his aggravated kidnapping." He said it well.
One thing I would never be able to do, though, it would be to make any kind of decision like that.
Yeah, it would be hard.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I know we brought up the death penalty and stuff, and I think it's really hard to ever know for you know what I mean? For sure.
I think that's why a lot of people are against the death penalty, because
I mean, to make a mistake and sentence someone innocent to death, I feel like that's worse almost, you know?
But I think the way the justice system is today too, people that receive the death penalty are on death row for like years. I mean, 10, 20 years even. Yeah. So I mean, they have plenty of time to appeal and change their outcome. So I think that also helps with that.
So did he ever talk, Larry? Did he ever?
He does. He does.
Okay.
He does. Because as of right now, we only know of one person that he has killed. He has only been convicted of killing one person.
Yes.
But, you know, I'm telling you about 17 other people.
Yeah.
So he does end up talking. Following his sentence, Eyler underwent several psychiatric evaluations. These tests determined he had severe borderline personality disorder, and experts theorized that Eyler had killed in response to real or perceived feelings of rejection from his lover. Maybe if him and John Dobrovolsky's never would have been a thing, he never would have reached the point of killing people this much. I mean, you can't put the blame on John Dobrovolsky's, but I'm just saying that's what they're saying. And he would discharge the rage that he had for John, because he wouldn't hurt John. He wouldn't hurt the people he loved. He would put that rage on the victims. And they also believe he had murdered in order to maintain a sense of control.
That's awful.
It is. It's a rough one. It's hard.
Yeah.
In May of 1988, Eyler did file a formal appeal that although he had dismembered Bridges' body and disposed of the remains, the actual murder itself was committed by Robert Little.
He said that?
Yes.
So he's throwing Robert Little under the bus.
Yeah, he's throwing Robert Little under the bus. After all Robert has done for him. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
But yes.
New apartment, new tires, everything.
He is. He's trying to get out of it by...
But it's weird because Robert does keep bailing him out like he owes him something.
Yeah, he may. He may owe him something. Who knows? I don't know. He said that Bridges had been driven to his apartment by Robert Little and that his alibi had never been corroborated. No one really ever looked into Robert Little's alibi to see if he really actually got home at 10:15 p.m.
Right.
And like I said, maybe that blood that was found under Daniel's fingernails was Robert Little's.
Right.
It's an unknown person. Why we didn't take their blood, I don't know. But this appeal was dismissed in October. They didn't look too much into it. In November of 1990, a Vermilion County prosecutor obtained evidence against Eyler and intended to present the evidence before an Indiana grand jury to determine whether there was sufficient evidence to charge Eyler with the murder of Stephen Egan. Now, I've said this a couple times, but there's just so many names. Stephen Egan was the boy that was found in the nearest shed, and when they went back to the shed. And this is someone that they thought could have been killed by two people.
Yeah.
They did inform Larry of his impending indictment, and Larry agreed to voluntarily confess to this, but he did insist that this particular murder had been committed with the assistance of Robert Little. Eyler agreed to confess to his guilt and testify against his alleged accomplice on the condition he be given a life sentence. Now, this wasn't changing the death sentence that he already had. This was just, you cannot charge me and give me a death sentence again, because I think he's trying to appeal the other death sentence as well. So it'd be a lot easier to get one death sentence off the table rather than two. So
Yeah.
do not give me a death sentence here, and I will tell you everything. His offer was accepted, and Eyler provided his attorney with a 17-page confession on December 4th. Eyler then pled guilty to the murder of Stephen Egan and testified that Robert Little was a willing participant. Eyler received a sentence of 60 years to be served concurrently with his existing sentence, and Little was then arrested on December 18th and formally charged with Egan's first-degree murder, facing a sentence of 60 years imprisonment if convicted. The following month, Larry's attorney offered a deal on behalf of her client, where Eyler would confess to his culpability in 20 further homicides if the death sentence against him would be changed to one of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. If they didn't agree to this, he would take these secrets to his grave. Now, threatening the police is not a good thing. You know, I feel like this is a threat. You know, I committed 20 other murders, and you guys haven't caught me for those. I'll tell you all about them. You just got to take my death sentence off the table. Well, the police did call his bluff, and they said no. We know you killed those other people. That's all that matters. The families know that you killed them. We don't need you to tell us that you did. So you're still going to die by lethal injection. Now, this is when Robert Little went to trial for the murder, and I'm not going to go into detail about Robert Little's trial. If you want to hear about Robert Little's trial, I will be more than happy to tell you. You all just tell me that that's what you want to hear. But since this is about Larry, I'm just going to kind of skip through this. But after a lengthy trial, and the jury took a long time to decide what they were going to come up with, but he was found not guilty. So
Not guilty?
Yeah. So I don't know what all evidence was brought in, but I do know the jury had a hard time. And he was let go.
That's
so I don't
very
really
surprising to me.
Yeah, I don't really have an opinion because I didn't look up all of the evidence that was against Robert to know if he did it or not. I mean, from what I've read of their relationship, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But I'd have to really dig into.
Did they stay in contact after Larry threw him under the bus?
I did not see that anywhere, so I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe
I'm
they
just
did.
Curious.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, time goes on, and Larry's still on death row. But we're going to fast forward to March 6th of 1994. This was little Emily's very first birthday. I was a whole whopping 1-year-old that day.
Oh my goodness.
Larry Eyler died in the infirmary of the prison that he was being held. So he did never make it to his lethal injection, but he did die, and his death was due to AIDS-related complications. He became seriously ill about 10 days before he passed away. Now, his health was declining over time.
Yeah.
And he decided personally that he wanted to confess to all these other murders. So he gave a confession to his attorney and said, after I die, you're allowed to tell people about this. So 2 days after Eyler's death, his attorney called a press conference in which she revealed the names and or descriptions of 17 individuals who her client confessed to having personally murdered. In his post-death confession, Eyler stated he had typically lured his victims, who included both straight and gay men, with promises of drugs, alcohol, money, transport, whichever one would get them in the vehicle. That's what he promised them. Prior to stabbing his victims, he would press the blade of the knife against their abdomen before telling the victims to make peace with God. And he did also claim to have never engaged in sex with any of his victims. It was like sexually motivated, but it wasn't at the same time.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
It seems like with his own personal rage,
Yes.
not like wanting,
Yeah.
Now, in his confession, did he mention Robert Little?
He does. He does. He still claims Robert Little was involved in a lot.
In all of them?
Not all of them, but he was involved in a lot.
Why would he lie about that on his deathbed?
That's what his lawyer does argue that, saying why would he lie about this on his deathbed? But I mean, he knows he's dying, so I don't know. He really wants someone to go down with him. I don't know. Or maybe Robert really was involved. I don't know.
I think he was.
But he was found not guilty, so whatever. He also stated that he gave the victims t-shirts to Robert Little, and Robert Little would use these to masturbate. Like I had said, he had called him. I think that's why I got that theory that when he was calling him, that Robert Little had some kind of fantasy about death. Like he wouldn't do it himself, but when Larry committed the crimes, he would give him details and...
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Did he say where the IDs were, the wallets?
No, not that I saw anywhere. Like I said, Eyler authorized his attorney to publicly release this confession after his death. He wanted the families of the victims to have closure.
Mm-hmm.
What a nice guy. What a nice serial killer.
Right.
You're finally giving this family some closure. And Eyler still claims to have no involvement in the murder of Daniel Bridges, and that it was Robert Little. And that Robert Little was an accomplice in 3 other murders. Now, I say to that, the one murder that Eyler, on his deathbed, says he had no involvement in is the one that got him caught. Like, are you serious? Like, you really want us to believe that, this many people have died, and the one that you're not actually, maybe it is true. Because he didn't get caught with anything else. The one that he wasn't involved in is the one that he got caught with.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the end of his story.
Okay. That was crazy.
I'm going to run through the victims' names real quick.
Okay.
And how old they were. Google Larry Eyler's victims. You get pictures of all of them, and it's just heartbreaking, but yeah. So here are what we have to what he confessed to, or what we suspect. And this is in order of victims. So Stephen Crockett was 19, Edgar Underkoffler was 26, John Johnson was 25, William Lewis was 19, Stephen Egan was 23, John Roach was 21, David Block, 22, Irvin Gibson, which was a friend of Daniel Bridges, was 16, John Bartlett, 19, Michael Bauer, 22, Richard Wayne Jr., 17, Jay Reynolds, 29, Gustavo Herrera, 26, Jimmy Roberts, 18, Daniel McNeve, 21, Richard Bruce Jr., 25, John Brandenburg Jr., 19, Keith Bibbs, 16. He was actually just found very recently. This is the one that was found 40 years after his death.
Oh my goodness.
Or maybe he was found, but he was identified.
Yeah.
Ralph Calise, 28, Eric Hansen, 18, and Daniel Bridges, 16. So nobody over the age of 30. Now, Eyler did not confess to the murder of Jay Reynolds and Eric Hansen. Eric Hansen was the one that was found in Wisconsin, that they really think because of the dismemberment and whatnot. Yeah. And Jay Reynolds was the one that was also found kind of far away. Yeah, he was the one that was found in Kentucky.
Well, I mean...
So he didn't confess to those.
Yeah.
But they are a very strong suspect in those homicides. And there were 3 unidentified victims. One that was considered to be 20 to 25, one that was considered to be 25 to 39, and one that was 16 to 19.
That is heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of young lives lost.
Yeah.
For no reason.
For no reason. And Daniel Bridges definitely, he never should have gotten to that one. And even though Eyler's death confession claimed Little's involvement in 4 murders, there was insufficient evidence and no further investigation would ensue. And you know what kind of blows my mind about this Robert Little thing is in today's day and age with media the way that it is, if you do anything controversial, you are shunned on media, you're fired from anything that you're doing.
Yeah.
He literally went back to work at Indiana State University like nothing happened. He's potentially killing kids that are the same age as these kids that are in college. And he's just
back to work.
Back to work at Indiana State University. I've tried really hard looking up like Robert Little and what he did afterwards, but I don't know if he was one that like changed his name and moved away or what, but I can't find much of anything on Robert Little that's not involving Eyler.
Like where he is now, what he's doing.
Yeah. If he's passed away, I can't find anything.
Yeah.
But that is it. That was rough.
That was sad. That was heartbreaking.
Yeah, and it's in our back door, you know. It started in Terre Haute. You don't ever think about stuff like this happening to you or close to home in it. Yeah. What are you going to be bringing us next time?
So, next week, I'm not giving out any hints, but it is another missing person case.
Oh, no.
That's still missing.
These ones kill me because I hate not knowing.
I know.
It absolutely kills me to not know.
Yeah, this one is a wild ride, too.
Oh, no. All right. Well, thank you all for listening and joining in on this long, brutal journey of Larry Eyler.
Thank you guys for listening. And don't forget, you can check us out on Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and Apple Podcast.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.